What's going on, everybody? I hope you are doing well. Today I've got 5 simple tips to help you get sub 15 on Square-1. If you're not quite sub 20 yet, I recommend checking out my 5 simple tips to get sub 20 on Square-1 video. It's quite old now, but hopefully it's still got some relevant tips in there. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Tip number 1 is cancelling into the equator flip during EP. Now, we're all familiar with this misaligned equator. Around half the time, at the end of your solve, you just have to do something like that and it flips. I'm not very good at doing that quickly, and it can take quite a long time for me to do it, and it's quite risky. So it could potentially cost me 1 or 2 seconds in a Square-1 solve. And if you're going for sub 15, that's quite a significant chunk of your time. So what you want to start doing is cancelling into this equator flip during the end of your EP algorithm. For example, I've got a nice U-perm here. Now what you could normally do is execute the U-perm, finish it off, then flip the equator like that. However, there is a way we can cancel into this equator flip during the algorithm. So if I do the first part like that, and I reach this point here, where I would then finish it off by moving it this way and moving it down like that. If I move it this way instead and cancel into it, I can then fix it like that and it will cancel out the equator flip. Now that was a little bit confusing, but mess around a bit and you can find the majority of your algs can be cancelled into it, the equator flip, just like that. Even edge can be cancelled in if you do it like this. I do it like that. And if you go like that, you can cancel into the equator flip just like that. Just another piece of advice that I didn't actually know until I averaged around 16 seconds. It may seem obvious for some of you. Flipping the equator, which is when it's not aligned because you've got either white on top if you always solve with yellow on top, or if you've got yellow on top if you solve with white on top, and you do this to flip it at the end of your solve. You can actually always avoid this by always, during edge orientation, always solving the colour that you have on top. So for example, I always solve with yellow on top. However, if I were to solve with white, if I were to solve with white on top, I will then later have to flip the equator. So what you can, to avoid doing this, you can always just solve it with yellow on top, and you won't have to flip the equator later on because it will be fixed like that. Alright, tip number 2 is knowing your algorithms on top and bottom. Now, for quite a long time, I only knew all my algorithms on top. So things like U-perms, which meant if I got it on the bottom, I would flip the equator and then have to execute it on the top. This takes quite a long time because then you've got to flip it back again to solve it. And it's not a slow move, but it adds up overall in your solve. So what you should do is learn all of your algs on top and bottom. However, there are a few exceptions. Things like parity, and for all parity case algorithms, it's just not that easy to learn on top and bottom because you're having to pretty much learn a lot of long algorithms and you might end up learning CSP later. And there are a few tricks to get around this. Now, you might end up with something, this is quite common, where you have parity on the bottom. Now, what I used to have to do I would often do something like that, just flip it around and do parity, which is really bad, but that's what I'd do. But there is a simple way to get around this. You can actually just use the edge algorithm to swap it up if you've got something like this. For example, doing it like that and then you get it on there, and that's just a lot quicker than doing other things like flipping the equator and stuff like that. This can also be used for opposite parity on bottom, just by flipping it like that, then just doing the opposite parity alg. As you can tell, I'm terrible at opposite parity alg. One more thing is, for simple cases like opposite, it's handy to know how to do it from different angles, as this can be used in so many different cases to narrow it down to easier cases. So I know how to do it from the back, like that, if it's like that thing, and there's also one at the front like that. So just knowing how to do those little things will just save you time in the long run. Oh, this of course also applies for corner permutation, so L's like this. It's handy to know them front and back as well. Alright, so tip number 3 is block preserving and EP predicting during corner permutation. Quite often you'll find you'll have nice blocks like this where the 2 colours are matched up. These can be preserved, well, at least one block can always be preserved if you've got a block for EP. For example, I've got my headlights at the back and back, so I would normally do something like that, and I find myself with all of these disgusting things. Well, it's not too bad because it's not parity, but you get the idea. However, what I did have here was 2 blocks here, and you can misalign during CP, you can misalign and do all your algs the exact same. So if I was to misalign this and my block, so neither of these blocks are getting preserved, I could execute the exact same alg, and now I'd have this nice case, because it preserved these blocks here. Now, this also makes it easier to predict what your EP cases are going to be. I am not very good at this, and I've got terrible look ahead, so I don't do this when it's difficult, but if there's lots of blocks, it can be very easy to predict what you've got. For example, if we had something like this, now you've got blocks all the way around here, so you know the bottom is going to be solved because all of these blocks are lined up in place, and if the block was like that and that, you would just misalign it like that, and then it would, so all of the bottom's going to be solved. And I see I've got a bar at the back, and these edges need to be flipped, and that's going to leave me with a U-perm on top. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't even look at what U-perm it would be. If you're getting better, obviously you would be able to see what U-perm, whether it's counterclockwise or clockwise, but I don't do that. All I know is it's going to be U-perm, but that still helps in moving into the EP alg. So I'd execute the algorithm, and I see I've got myself my nice U-perm, which I execute in the back like that. Alright, tip number 4 is just messing around with cube shape. Now, lots of the time I've seen Square-1 solvers who are averaging 14-15 seconds, and their cube shape is just horrible just because they haven't figured out optimal solutions for it and stuff like that. Now, you can go online and find all the optimal solutions, but that can be quite daunting, and sometimes I think it's easier just to discover them yourself and just work around it. So it might not be optimal, but you're constantly finding out easier ways to execute algorithms and stuff. For example, this alg here, if you just look at it, it might seem like quite a daunting case, but it can be cancelled down into such a simple little thing by just adjusting it like that, so you get square chi on top, just like that. So just figuring stuff out like that. Another example is this case here. Now, lots of people don't know how simple this case really is. All it is one slice away from similar fists, and yet I see so many crazy solutions for it. So just figuring cube shape out like that is so beneficial for your solves and getting more efficient and faster. Now, my final tip is turning, just faster turning. Smoother and faster turning is so beneficial for a faster Square-1 solve, and if you're going for sub 15, that's when you need to start having quite fast turning. By no means should I be giving this tip, honestly. My turning is horrific. It's really not great. However, it has improved since I started implementing a few little things. For example, just drilling algorithms and figuring out a specific turning thing. For example, just drilling parity. Now, I don't think I'm half bad at executing parity just because I did it so many times. When I get it in competition or in a solve at home, I can do it instantly with a high success rate at executing it properly. You can do this for pretty much all of your EPL. It's very important for EP because that's where the majority of your algorithms are, and they're obviously the longest and hardest to execute. So yeah, just like learning how to execute all of your algs. I used to always execute adjacent like that until I realised that it's much easier if you execute it down like that. Yeah, just finding things like that, super beneficial at getting better turning. Well, I hope that video was useful and it helped you to get sub 15 at Square-1. If it was, feel free to leave a like, or don't, up to you. And other than that, have a good day.